My name is Marielle Cross, and before I tell you anything else, you need to understand one thing. The world you see is not the world that exists, especially in December. People wrap this month in glitter and laughter, pretending cold air feels welcoming, pretending twinkling lights are enough to push back everything lurking in the shadows. They call it holiday cheer, tradition, faith, magic. But that word magic, they use it wrong. They use it carelessly, like it's harmless, like it's pretty, like it's something soft and innocent, wrapped in ribbons and cinnamon and songs. But magic, true magic, does not care about joy or comfort. It does not care about tradition, culture, or prayers whispered before bed. True magic is older than all of that. It existed before Christmas, before Yule, before Saturnalia, before any name humans attached to winter. December does not belong to people. It never did. And once you've seen the spiritual reality behind it, once you've witnessed what waits in the cold darkness beyond the veil, you stop seeing the world the same way. Every December, whether you believe in it or not, something ancient wakes up. I used to feel the shift subconsciously long before I understood it. As a child, I assumed it was excitement, those strange December sensations humming under my skin. The air felt sharper, the nights felt heavier. My dreams grew vivid, like the world behind my eyelids was more real than the one I woke in. I never questioned it. No one ever does. We're conditioned to believe December is beautiful and holy, a time of warmth and love. So when shadows thicken and intuition flares, we tell ourselves it's nostalgia or imagination, but it isn't. By the time I was 17, the pull was undeniable. I thought I was different, chosen, even before anyone told me. I could feel energy shift around me. I could sense when someone was hiding something, lying, hurting. I could predict events before they happened. Most teenagers ignore things like that. They drink, party, chase validation, and drown out the unknown. I didn't want to drown it out. I wanted to understand it. That's the thing no one warns you about. Darkness doesn't chase, it waits. And it waited for me with patience that didn't feel human. It watched me notice things. It watched me follow curiosity instead of fear. And eventually, it sent someone to me, not with threats, not with warnings, with comfort, with answers, with belonging. People picture witches as desperate, angry girls seeking revenge or power. But the truth is far simpler. Most of us started with questions no one else could answer. Most of us were lonely in a way that friendships or families couldn't fix. Most of us felt disconnected from reality, like we were walking beside life instead of living inside it. December made that feeling stronger. The nights were longer, the silence was heavier, the world seemed to pause like it was holding its breath. Something inside me waited with it. And the strangest part, I wasn't afraid, not yet, not then. Fear only comes after you know what's really watching you. So before I take you into the memories I've kept locked away for years, before I tell you what really happens spiritually every December, the darkest month of the year, remember this. You asked for the truth. And once you hear it, you will never look at December the same way again. Now, let me take you back to where it began. I was 17 when it happened, young enough to be reckless, old enough to believe every thought had meaning, and fragile enough to crave belonging more than logic. December had already begun shifting around me in ways I didn't yet understand. Lights looked too bright, silence felt weighted, and nighttime didn't feel empty, it felt occupied. I remember the exact night it began. I had gone for a walk in the freezing dark, the kind teenagers romanticize because they think sadness is poetic. My breath fogged the air, and the snow crunched under my boots. But beneath the simple sounds of winter, there was something else, something like a pulse, steady and deep, coming from the earth itself. I didn't know then that I was hearing it spiritually. I just thought I was imagining things. That's when I saw her. Elara stood under an old oak tree at the edge of the path, tall and still, as if the world bowed to her presence. She didn't look like someone who belonged to the cold. Her skin was warm-toned, her hair dark and long, and her posture graceful in a way that felt intentional, ancient even. But it was her eyes, sharp, knowing, and unsettling, that held me in place. She smiled, not kindly, but with recognition, as if she knew me already, as if I had been expected. "You feel it, don't you?" she asked softly, her voice smooth enough to glide into my thoughts. I remember swallowing hard, unsure whether to walk away or walk closer. No stranger should have known what I felt, not when I hadn't even understood it myself. Yet something in me responded without hesitation. "Yes," I whispered. She stepped closer, not rushing, not pushing, just existing with a confidence that made the air colder and warmer at the same time. "Most people ignore it," she murmured. "They drown it out with noise, distraction, celebrations, but not you." Her gaze flicked over me like she was reading something written on my bones. "You're awake." Awake. Such a simple word, but it struck something deep in me. Curiosity, validation, danger laced with allure. I didn't step back. I didn't question. I stood there waiting for more, like a moth hovering too close to flame. Elara handed me a folded piece of parchment sealed with black wax. No Christmas cheer, no polite explanation, just symbols carved into the seal that I didn't recognize but somehow felt familiar. "If you're ready," she said, "come." Her voice held no demand, only certainty. Winter reveals what the rest of the year hides. With that, she walked away, silent in the snow, leaving only the cold and a fragment of breath hanging in the dark. I stood there trembling, not from weather, but from the knowledge that something irreversible had just happened. I knew, even before I opened the parchment, that accepting the invitation would change everything. But I opened it anyway. The first time I attended the ceremony, I thought it would be beautiful, like the movies, with soft candlelight and whispers of incense drifting through the air. I was naive. I wasn't prepared for the gravity of what I was stepping into, and I felt it immediately the moment I crossed the threshold into the clearing behind the old abandoned chapel on the outskirts of town. The air was dense, sharp with cold, and something else I couldn't name, something heavy and alive. It pressed against my skin and made my chest tighten. I wanted to breathe, but the air seemed to resist, thick with anticipation. The circle was already formed. The other women and men, though few, moved with a fluid precision that made me feel like a clumsy shadow. Each of them held candles, black and white, their flames dancing without wind, casting jagged, shifting shadows across the frost-covered ground. Symbols were carved into the snow, each one a language I didn't know but felt instinctively. Some resembled stars, others spirals, others shapes that made my stomach clench. The symbols pulsed with a subtle energy, almost like they were alive, and I felt my own pulse sync with them in a way that frightened and thrilled me simultaneously. Elara was at the center, as always. She was radiant in the low light, commanding attention without a word. When she began to speak, her voice carried a cadence that seemed to vibrate in the bones rather than the ears. She chanted low and melodic, calling names of forces I had only read about in old forbidden texts, summoning energies that bent around us in ways I could feel but not fully see. The chant grew louder, not in volume, but in intensity, each word seeming to scrape against the edge of reality. I wanted to look away, but my body refused. It felt like being pulled into a river too strong to fight, and in that moment I understood something crucial. These rituals were not about pretty spells or harmless wishes. They were offerings, earth and ash, herbs, dark water, and sometimes things more personal, fragments of memory, fear, and devotion that each participant placed into the circle. I remember the first time I laid down something of myself, a fear I had carried for years, and the instant it touched the ground, I felt exposed, raw, unprotected. The energy around the circle shifted then, and I realized it was watching, studying, absorbing. It wasn't gentle or forgiving, it was aware. As the ceremony progressed, the boundaries between the physical world and something else, something ancient and waiting, began to blur. Shadows elongated unnaturally, stretching across the clearing, curling around the trees. The wind carried whispers that sounded almost like voices, sometimes urgent, sometimes mocking. I felt hands brush against my back that weren't human, fleeting touches that sent icy sparks crawling over my skin, and yet I couldn't pull away. I was tethered to it, mesmerized, craving the forbidden knowledge it offered. By the time the ritual ended, I was trembling, exhausted, exhilarated, and profoundly changed. I had glimpsed a force far older and more powerful than I could comprehend. I had thought I would be in control. I had thought I was choosing to participate, but in reality, the ritual had already chosen me, and from that moment on, December would never feel the same again. Over the next few years, the shift began subtly, so subtle that I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. At first, it showed up in my dreams. They stopped being random, chaotic flashes of subconscious nonsense and instead became structured, lucid, almost instructional. I would walk through forests I had never visited but knew intimately. I would speak languages I had never learned but somehow understood. Sometimes I would wake with dirt on my hands or the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, and I could never explain why. The line between waking and dreaming blurred, and I began to dread sleep as much as I craved it, because it felt less like rest and more like visitation. Then came the emotional changes. December no longer evoked the warmth or childlike anticipation it once did. Instead, I felt raw and heightened, like every nerve in my body was more exposed. Colors looked sharper, sounds carried depth and meaning, and the winter nights no longer felt empty. They felt crowded, like unseen eyes lingered in the corners of every shadow. Small things irritated me, simple interactions drained me, and moments that should have sparked joy felt hollow. But when ritual season approached, the heaviness wasn't a burden. It felt intoxicating. My body responded to the solstice the way others responded to adrenaline or euphoria. My intuition also sharpened into something far beyond instinct. I could sense lies before they were spoken, feel hostility before it became visible, and predict events with eerie accuracy. If someone walked into a room angry, even if they smiled, I knew. If someone was scared, I felt it in my own chest, and in December it was strongest. People dismissed it as seasonal mood changes or stress. I knew better. Something was waking inside me, something that wasn't entirely mine. The energy during solstice seasons grew heavier each year. Rituals became darker, more demanding. Instead of offering symbolic in nature, we began giving pieces of ourselves, our fears, our tears, sometimes even our blood. And with every offering, the presence behind the ritual pressed closer, like a predator leaning in, sniffing, measuring. I began noticing changes in others too. Some looked exhausted, their eyes permanently shadowed. Some became obsessed with knowledge or power, as though possessed by an unquenchable hunger. And some, quietly, without explanation, simply stopped coming. Their absence was never addressed. Elara never mourned them. No one asked questions. It was as if they had never existed at all. By then, part of me knew the truth. We weren't opening a door, we were being absorbed into something that had always been there, waiting patiently for us to stop pretending we were in control. And yet I stayed. The darkness didn't frighten me, it claimed me. The real shift wasn't just in rituals or energy, it was in identity. Every December, I lost pieces of who I used to be, and I didn't resist. At the time, it felt like evolution. Now, looking back, I know it was consumption. Something ancient was changing me, molding me, marking me. And the most terrifying part? I welcomed it. I stayed in that circle for nearly 10 years, 10 Decembers of growing obsession, fear, and hunger that I pretended I could control. Each year, the rituals became heavier, the presence stronger, the energy more invasive. I had convinced myself it was power, that I was learning, growing, mastering. But in the winter of my last year, everything shifted in a way I couldn't ignore. That December, the night of the solstice, felt different from the moment I woke. The air was too still, too thick, as if the world itself was holding its breath in anticipation. My dreams had been restless for weeks, shadows spilling over into my waking hours, whispers tugging at the edges of my mind. When I arrived at the clearing, the others were already there, circling the carved symbols as usual. Elara stood at the center, calm, radiant, and terrifying as ever. But this time I felt it clearly, an energy far older, far hungrier than anything we had ever summoned. It wasn't waiting politely at the edges. It wasn't a game or a lesson. It was present, vast, and patient, and it was aware of me, aware in a way that felt like scrutiny, like hunger. The ritual began as always, the chants rising and falling, but I could no longer convince myself that I was leading or guiding. Every movement I made, every gesture I repeated, every word I whispered, I felt like a puppet, not a magician, not a witch, a pawn feeding something that didn't care about me, my intentions, or my soul. I looked around at the others, seeing them for the first time with clarity. Their eyes glowed with the same obsession I had carried all these years, but many of them were hollow. They were vessels, willingly offering themselves piece by piece. And Elara, she wasn't leading us. She was curating us, ensuring we were useful, keeping us on the path where we thought we had chosen our destiny. As the chants grew louder and the energy thickened, a panic rose inside me, a panic I had never known in all the years I had been there. I realized that the feeling I had tried to ignore all those Decembers, the gnawing awareness that we were not wielding power but feeding it, was undeniable. It wasn't subtle anymore. It pressed against my chest and teeth and lungs. The shadows in the clearing seemed to lean closer, as if testing how much they could consume without resistance. And that's when I understood. I had a choice. Not to stay in the circle and pretend, not to bow my head to the energy and my own obsession, but to run. I remember the exact moment, the instant when I tore my gaze away from Elara and the others, when I felt the invisible tether snapping as I moved toward the edge of the clearing. The air resisted me, cold and heavy, like fingers trying to drag me back. My legs burned, my lungs burned. Every instinct screamed to stop, to stay, to submit. And yet a clarity I hadn't known in years surged through me. I was done. I ran. The darkness followed. I could feel it, stretching, reaching, but for the first time I didn't care. My fear was sharp, raw, almost tangible, and yet exhilarating. I was running not just from Elara or the circle or the rituals, but from a version of myself I no longer recognized, an identity forged in shadows and hunger. By the time I crossed the last stretch of forest to the road, the presence had lessened, lingering like smoke, insistent but no longer overpowering. I didn't look back, not once. That night, the snow and the cold were my sanctuary, and for the first time in 10 years, I breathed freely. but I knew instinctively that the darkness hadn't abandoned me. It never would. Now, years later, I see December with unflinching clarity, and it terrifies me how little the world truly understands it. People wrap it in cheer, in lights, in songs, in promises of peace and joy, but all of that is superficial, a thin veil over the deeper reality that pulses beneath the frost and snow. December is not just the coldest month outside, it is the coldest month spiritually, the time when the thin barrier between what is seen and what is waiting grows fragile. It is a month of confrontation, of exposure, of energy that predates humanity and laughs at our feeble attempts to contain it. The winter solstice, the longest night, is not a celebration for light. It is a threshold, and the darkness that gathers during that threshold is ancient, patient, and relentless. It is not evil in the way people think of monsters or demons. It is indifferent. It observes, it consumes, and it tests anyone foolish enough to think they can interact with it without consequence. People are drawn to it because of its beauty, its power, its mystery, and like I once was, they mistake fascination for mastery, unaware that the first mistake is thinking you can leave anything untouched when it has already seen you. Even now, I feel it during December. It coils around cities, slipping into homes, brushing the edges of consciousness with whispers no one hears, but some feel. There are energies that wake only during this time, entities and presences too subtle for ordinary senses, but palpable to those attuned, those who have ever been called to the dark. The veil thins, yes, but not just for ghosts or spirits. It thins for power, for obsession, for loss, for hunger. It magnifies what is already inside, reflecting desires, fears, and regrets in stark clarity. Most people never notice because they are distracted by warmth and light, by human gatherings and distractions, by artificial cheer. But for those who are sensitive, for those who listen, December is a battlefield. It is a month where internal shadows grow long, where old griefs resurface with unexpected intensity, where the energy of the unseen world tests boundaries and nudges humans toward choices they will later regret. There is a reason rituals, both ancient and secret, have always centered around this time. The forces that awaken are neither cruel nor benevolent. They simply are. And everything is measured by willingness, by attention, by presence. I have seen friends and initiates succumb to December in ways I will never forget. They arrived curious and hopeful, confident they could interact with the energy, bend it to their will, and leave unscathed. And yet, many left hollow, altered, or gone entirely. The month strips pretension, exposes weaknesses, and forces a reckoning with forces far older than anyone's imagination. The world outside continues to sing and laugh, oblivious, but beneath that surface, the currents of power shift, and those who are awake know the truth. December is not a season of comfort. It is a season of confrontation, of recognition, of surrender, whether willing or not. And now, having stepped away from the circle, having survived its hunger and its seduction, I still cannot escape its influence. Every December, I feel the energy rise, patient and knowing. It does not forgive. It does not forget. It simply waits, as it always has, observing the world and the fragile, foolish humans who think light and warmth are enough to keep it at bay. The question, I have come to understand, is not whether darkness exists or even whether it can harm. The question is how close you are willing to stand and whether you can ever truly leave once it has touched you. So here I am years later, no longer a part of the circle, no longer a participant in the rituals that once consumed my soul, yet still tethered to December in ways that terrify me even now. I speak to you not to frighten, though perhaps I must, but to illuminate the truth that the world refuses to see. People believe the darkness is distant, abstract, something they can ignore until the season passes. They are wrong. The darkness does not wait. It watches, it whispers, it remembers every soul who has stepped into its path, every choice made in ignorance or curiosity, and it waits patiently for the opportunity to consume. I survived, yes, but survival is not immunity. Survival is witness. Survival is memory. And memory is dangerous in the presence of something as ancient as December itself. I have seen the faces of those who thought they could bargain with forces older than the stars, who thought they could touch the edges of power and walk away unchanged. Some returned with a hollow in their chest that no warmth could fill. Some returned with eyes that no longer reflected human light. Some never returned at all. You may read this and think it is allegory or exaggeration. You may read this and believe it is merely a story from someone lost in old traditions, fantasies, or superstition. But you will be wrong, because December does not need your belief to exist, and it does not need your fear to act. It simply is, as indifferent as ice, as patient as stone, as inevitable as the turning of the sun. I tell you this because you're standing at the edge of a choice, whether you know it or not. Every December, every long night, every solstice, you are being watched. Your energy, your intentions, your desires, your fears, they all rise to meet the unseen, whether you welcome it or not. People speak of holiday magic, of light defeating darkness, of cheer protecting them. But those are lies told by those who have never seen the hunger that prowls when the veil thins. You will not see it in a fireplace or a decorated tree. You will not hear it in music or laughter. You will feel it if you are sensitive, if you are awake. And if you feel it, you will know. The shadows are patient and they are hungry. I speak from experience. I know what happens when curiosity outweighs caution, when desire blinds judgment, when fear is ignored. I know the rituals, the energy, the way the unseen waits for even the slightest weakness to slip in, to take hold, to mark. I know what it is to feel your identity fracture under the pressure of forces you cannot name, to realize too late that you were never in control, that you were never meant to be. I know the taste of liberation when you run, when you leave, when you escape, but even then, the echo never leaves you. December never forgets. December never forgives, and it will always find you again. Now I leave you with this truth. The world will continue to dress December in lights, in warmth, in joy, in songs meant to distract. But beneath it all, the energy waits, patient, ancient, observing. And you, whether you recognize it or not, stand on the threshold. Every thought, every action, every choice in this month matters far more than you can comprehend. You can ignore it, you can celebrate ignorance, or you can awaken. But once the veil shifts, once the darkness notices you, once you feel its presence brush against your very soul, there is no returning to innocence. The question is not whether December holds darkness. The question is, will you see it, acknowledge it, and survive it? Or will you, like so many before, step too close, reach too far, and vanish without ever realizing what you've awakened? The answer is yours, and it is closer than you think.